day after bombing nuclear sites in Iran, the US president's hinting at regime change as the Middle East teeters on the edge of a wider war. New details have been revealed about the scale of America's operation, including the deception tactics that were used and the dozens of warplanes involved. The Australian government's now endorsed the US strikes, but it's also repeating calls for de-escalation. As the world braces for Iran's response, the country's president is vowing to retaliate. That could include choking global oil supplies by blocking a crucial shipping route. We have correspondents in the US and Middle East tonight, and we'll get the reaction from Canberra shortly. But we begin our coverage with Kamin Gock in Washington.
After a non-stop 37-hour flight, B-2 bombers returned to base in America's Midwest after completing a covert mission shrouded in deception.
Thanks to President Trump's bold and visionary leadership and his commitment to peace through strength, Iran's nuclear ambitions have been obliterated.
Dubbed Operation Midnight Hammer, the US mission involved more than 125 aircraft, striking 3 key Iranian nuclear sites. At the centre of the so-called strike package, 7 B-2 stealth bombers located at the Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. To maintain tactical surprise, a decoy group heads west across the Pacific, while the main strike group heads east for an 18-hour flight, requiring multiple mid-air refuels. On approach to the targets of Fordo, Natanz and Isfahan, the bombers link up with fighter jet escorts. Then it begins. Before the bombers enter Iran's airspace, a US submarine fires more than 24 Tomahawk cruise missiles at the Isfahan nuclear site. Once in Iran, the bomber group's escorts fire on potential surface-to-air threats. Then the bombers strike, dropping 14 13-ton massive ordnance penetrators or bunker busters. The heavily fortified Fordo facility is hit first at 2:10 a.m. local time. Then the B-2s drop their bunker busters on Natanz. The Tomahawk missiles fired on Isfahan hit last, striking at 2:35 a.m. local time. The entire engagement over in 25 minutes.
The scope of this was intentionally limited. That's the message that we're sending. With the capabilities of the American military nearly unlimited. So Iran, in that sense, has a choice.
We have no interest in a protracted conflict. We have no interest in boots on the ground.
But Iran says the US has crossed a red line.
The warmongering and lawless administration in Washington is solely and fully responsible for the dangerous consequences and far-reaching implications of its act of aggression.
If any of the nuclear facilities survived, Israel says it will finish the job.
We targeted, eliminated Natanz. Fordo took a hard hit. I said we will know exactly the full impact of the strike, and we are determined to complete everything.
In a coordinated media blitz, Trump's most senior cabinet members spent the day reinforcing the idea that the administration was not seeking a regime change. But as so often occurs, the president went off script, outwardly questioning the future of Iran's supreme leader. If the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change? The prospect of US involvement in another foreign conflict is dividing the Republican base.
Most of us were tired of the wars in the Middle East and Eastern Europe, and we were promised that we wouldn't be engaging in another one. Yet here we see this happening.
Finally, President Trump has taken decisive action to ensure that they are not going to get nuclear weapons on his watch.
Praise and support.
We don't want your racist war.
Uproar and fear. Americans brace themselves for what could come next. Kamin Gock, ABC News, Washington.
Chanting death to the United States and we are ready to fight. Crowds swarmed the Iranian president on the streets of Tehran.
What America did is truly unforgivable. Iran is stronger than they perceive.
This is how the great Satan functions. Deception. This is all deception.
Iran's supreme leader posting this image on social media with the words, "The Zionist enemy has made a grave mistake, committed a major crime. It must be punished." An emergency meeting was called at the UN Security Council as the world waits to see what Iran will do next.
We now risk descending into a rat hole of retaliation after retaliation.
Israel's top diplomat was quick to defend the United States, calling it a necessary and brave decision.
You cannot sit this one out. You cannot condemn the firefighters while the arsonist tries to light more fires.
But China and Russia are lining up behind their ally, Iran.
The US has opened a Pandora's box. No one knows what new catastrophes and suffering it will bring.
The Iranian response to these US strikes is likely to continue in the form of missile barrages against Israel. We are currently seeking shelter, like millions across the country, as a nationwide alert has just been issued. The Iranian parliament has also agreed to a proposal to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, something which will send shockwaves across the global economy, considering 20% of the world's oil supplies travel through it. There is also the possibility Iran could strike US military sites. That in itself would be a dramatic escalation again in the course of this war. The Israel Defense Forces is continuing its strikes, taking out a missile depot and strategic command centre in Iran. While in Tel Aviv, another sleepless night with missile warning sirens triggered. The damage in recent days extensive, but there have been no deaths from a population trained to seek shelter.
In Tel Aviv, Australians stranded wait patiently for their escape.
I'm not scared for myself. I'm scared for the country. I'm scared for the world. But it is hard being on your own.
For over a week, commercial flights have been cancelled and now land crossings too.
It's been pretty stressful, but very glad to be here.
With Israel briefly reopening its airspace, the Australian government had a window of opportunity, organising a flight out.
We're essentially trying to get a group of Australians out on an assisted departure flight to the UAE.
But before they even left the hotel,
please proceed directly to the closest shelter on your floor.
Warnings of more airstrikes saw them ushered behind closed doors to be told the flight was cancelled.
But the situation on the ground is uncertain and fluid and risky.
The US bombing raid on Iran has intensified the risk of reprisals or worse.
We don't want escalation and a full-scale war.
Australia's Prime Minister, fresh from a meeting of his National Security Committee, now supporting America's actions.
Iran cannot be allowed to get a nuclear weapon, and we support action to prevent that. That is what this is.
Initially, the government hesitated. When the news first broke on Sunday morning, Labor, through an unnamed spokesperson, declined to endorse the US bombing, drawing criticism from the opposition.
I think the Prime Minister has been too slow, too silent and too passive.
As recently as October, Australia's military provided support for US airstrikes against Iranian-backed Houthi rebels in the region. This time, the Prime Minister won't say whether Australia was involved in any way.
This was a unilateral action by the United States.
Australia, it appears, had no forewarning. Anthony Albanese emphasising we're not a central player in this conflict. But he's joined allies in urging an irate Iran to pick the path of diplomacy, all too aware that those calling the shots have marched headlong into dangerous and uncharted territory.
What happens now matters.
And anyone who talks about this rules-based global order is really being nostalgic.
Leaving those in the firing line longing for safety. Jane Norman, ABC News, Canberra.
This video was captured by construction workers on a building site next to a military base in Tehran. There's chaos after the initial Israeli airstrike, and then another hits. You hear the men calling for their friend, Abdul Wali. In the mayhem, his friends frantically try to revive him. Smoke billows from the attack as they try to rush to the nearest hospital. But the 18-year-old from Afghanistan was killed in this strike last week. His father says the young man was in Iran to provide for their family.
It was terrible. We were in a very bad state. When we received the news of his death, we were devastated.
It's unclear how many civilians have died in Iran since this war began. The country's Ministry of Health puts the death toll at about 430, but that includes military personnel. Contacts I've been speaking with on the ground fear many more civilians will be killed if this war continues to escalate.
They tell us that they just want to go for the nuclear bombs and these kind of things, but they kill a lot of innocent people. I feel like my heart is bleeding.
On one hand, I am glad that the regime who killed our children, blinded them, imprisoned us are dead. On the other hand, our national pride has been attacked and we feel humiliated.
While some Iranians are urging a strong retaliation, the realities of the war's violence already ripple through the region.
He was my son. It's extremely painful. You never forget your child.
The human cost of an ever-deepening crisis. Allyson Horn, ABC News.
Let's go back to Matthew Doran, who's been taking shelter in Tel Aviv. Matthew, as we've been reporting, some Australians have been told they're not getting evacuated this evening. How are people who are still there feeling about these continuing attacks from Iran?
Jeremy, good evening. Of course, the Australians who have registered that they want to leave the country do still intend to do so, and this is a disappointment for them. But speaking to a number of Aussies in this country and also members of the Israeli public more broadly, there is this phrase which repeatedly gets uttered, that Iran is an existential threat to this country, and that as a result, the Israeli military offensive in the country and now the US's intervention, albeit in a limited capacity for the time being, that is welcome. Without that, the threat would be even worse. Now, that might seem like a weird thing to say when these Iranian missile barrages continue to send warning sirens off across the country at all times of the day and night. We've seen in the last short while alerts being issued for northern parts of Israel up towards the Lebanon border. That situation now all clear, but that is still the sentiment there. And as the world is waiting to see how Iran responds to this US strike, these US strikes on its nuclear facilities, we are also seeing the Israeli military continue to hit assets across Iran, including at 6 airports in the last short while. Israel showing no sign of wanting to hold back for the time being. Jeremy.
Matthew Doran in Tel Aviv.